Before we discuss the sustainable opportunities for food distribution, let's look at the underlying reasons for why food is transported. Food is transported because of densely populated areas, for the demand of out-of-season food, because of regional specialization and comparative advantages that take place throughout the country, and because of the consolidation in the food industry. Food distribution is essential in densely populated areas because there just isn't enough room in those areas to grow food, and even in the surrounding areas. So if you look at the 8.5 million people in New York City, and even around New York City is closer to 12 million, everyone has to consume about a ton of food per year to meet USDA's nutritional requirements. So if all of the food production in New York State went to New York City, it would still leave only about enough food to feed 55% of the city's population. This distinction between geography and population is wonderfully illustrated in this anamorphic map that shows New York counties in proportion to their population. It should also be understood that not all areas are suitable for farming. For example, in this map of plant hardiness zones in New York State, we see the famous Adirondack State Park. It's a mountainous area with poor soil, and during the winter, the temperature gets down to negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's not a good place for farming. So consequently, out of the 12.2 million hectares in New York State, 3.25 million hectares are actually farmed. It's about a quarter of the land is farmed. And just so you know, a hectare is about half the size of a football field. So given the situation, it makes sense that food would have to come in from other parts of the country to feed New York City citizens. But even if New Yorkers could survive solely on the food grown within the state, they would probably complain about the lack of variety in their diet, particularly over the winter. As we see in the seasonal food chart from the Washington, D.C. area, the variety of food drops off dramatically from the time period of December through May. In December, we're eating a lot of root vegetables like carrots and potatoes. And then from March, April, and May, the food are a lot of greens and cabbages. Yum. My family loves their cabbages and kale, but not as a staple part of our diet. To give another perspective, here's the Alabama seasonal food chart. And you can see that there is quite a large area where the growing season doesn't produce anything. Food transportation also allows regions to specialize in food production for which they are best suited. Vermont, for example, has a short growing season, rolling hills and rocky soil, which are poor conditions for growing most crops, but suitable for raising dairy cows. Although Vermont doesn't hold an absolute advantage over Wisconsin, New York, or Pennsylvania, it specializes in producing the food for which it has the least disadvantage. In this case, Vermont focuses on dairy production and it ships its surplus product to other regions of the United States. In doing so, it allows other regions to specialize in the economic activities for which it has the greatest comparative advantage. You should know the economic term comparative advantage because it doesn't just apply to agricultural markets, it's a principle that underpins all global trade. And there are natural and economic conditions that help to drive specialization. For example, there are some wheat varieties that grow well in cold, dry climates of the Great Plains. This example is red hard spring wheat. It's designed just for North Dakota, actually for the northwestern corner of North Dakota. Soil conditions can also drive specialization. For example, potatoes grow well in the sandy soil of Maine, and tomatoes are grown in the sandy soil of Florida, where irrigation floods them with nutrient-rich water and allows them to grow in the hot sun. Economic and political factors also promote specialization in the agricultural sector. For example, a hog producer may be drawn to a region with existing infrastructure, which could include meat packing plants, access to inexpensive corn, and roads. They may also look for sparse human populations or areas that have fewer regulations against industrial food animal production. In this chart of hog sales as a percentage of overall agricultural sales by county, we can see a hotbed of activity in the Midwest around Iowa, but also in North Carolina. Why North Carolina, you may ask? Well, North Carolina has always had hog production, and as this map shows that as of 1959, there was between 10,000 and 200,000 hogs produced in particular counties there. In the past few decades, however, hogs have increasingly been raised in large-scale confinement operations in which thousands of animals are packed into small spaces. Hog production is now highly concentrated in the eastern part of the state, and in recent years, more than 8 million hogs are sold from a single county in North Carolina. One key economic reason why hog farming took off in North Carolina was that tobacco farming was dwindling, and this was a way to replace it. Industry consolidation has also been listed as a factor for increasing the distance that food producers need to travel to get their products to market. The logic goes like this. Consolidation leads to larger and fewer food processing facilities. Large food processing facilities prefer to work with large producers who can supply the required volume and throughput of food. In fact, large processing facilities don't want to work with small producers because of the transactional costs involved. So this means that small farmers really are reliant on small processing facilities. But small processing facilities can't compete with the larger facilities, and they go out of business, forcing small producers to go further and further to find the small processing facilities that they can use. This map illustrates the situation by overlapping the number of small cattle farms in the country by county with the small slaughter establishments. So in the areas that I've highlighted, small farmers would have to travel farther to get their products processed and then to market. And of course, this doesn't include the fact that large producers are traveling further to send their products to a smaller number of very large processors as well. So consolidation overall really drives the need to travel greater distances. And with that, we can see that we have a food system that's highly reliant on transportation, either because of densely populated cities or the fact that people want food that's out of season, or there's a need for regional specialization, and then, of course, the impact of consolidation.